How you doing? I'm CK with Anion, and today we're going to be testing out MVP's 6 CFM pump. This is an option that we have available, certified with the trifecta system here, in place of the twin Goliath pumps. Now, the MVP pump is a 6 CFM pump, whereas the Goliath pumps are 1.5 CFM each. So, this should be about 4 times as fast as one of our Goliath pumps. But we're going to put that to the test today. We're going to put it head-to-head against one of our Goliath pumps. So what we're going to do is fill each of these columns with 5 pounds of butane. Then we're going to side-by-side comparison, run them at the same time, and see what the results are. Now we've got both of these columns already pulled down to a vacuum, so they're ready to go. We tried before by opening both valves and just opening the valve on the tank and letting them fill. Naturally, the pressure should be even and it should flow the same. However, we found out that wasn't the case. One would always get a little bit more than the other. So to make this really fair, we're going to zero out the scale. We're going to put 5 pounds in each one. That way we know exactly how much is in there. All right, we've got both these columns pulled to a full vacuum, so we're ready to start filling. Now it is important to note we pulled them down to a vacuum with the Goliath pump. That way the vacuum on each of them was even. The Goliath pumps are able to pull a full vacuum, and we've set it up in such a way that you can vent it to atmosphere, pull a full vacuum, and then reconnect it. This way, you don't need any secondary pumps from the outside system, especially a lot of those that are not C1D1 compliant and aren't supposed to be in the room. Now for this test, we're going to be using this Jalabo F25. It's somewhat undersized, but it should do the job. It doesn't keep the tank super cold, but it at least keeps it cold enough that our pressures stay down. We're also going to be heating up our collection vessels to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I know that seems a little bit hot, but in today's comparison it doesn't really matter. Also, we've configured our collection vessels specially so that way we can actually run them at hotter temperatures. For our pump configuration, we've got a single Goliath running here. The one over here has been disconnected. That's ported up and running into this cooling coil here. We also have, from this middle column here, is run down connected over to our 6 CFM pump, and from there it's going to the cooling coil there. Now generally with the trifecta system, this cooling coil is not part of it. However, since we're using a somewhat smaller pressure vessel and we don't have quite as large of a cooling Jalabo chiller here, we're going to go ahead and use that in there just to help things out. Initial starting pressures are going to be somewhat low, right around 30 psi. In order to aid in filling, because this pressure vessel is not set up with nitrogen assist, we went ahead and utilized this third column. We squirted a little bit of butane into this one here, so if we can't get a full 5 pounds in each one, we'll start the recovery process on this last column, which will help flood both these two columns here. Now for this test, we're going to be using N-butane. It's a little bit lower pressure than its alternative of propane, but the MVP pump doesn't do that well with propane or higher pressures. So we're going to give it as best of shot as we can by using a lower pressure solvent. Now you can see they're both at an equal vacuum here, so we're ready to start filling. All right, now we're ready to start filling, so we'll go ahead and start with the Goliath column here first. All right, so we went just a touch over 5 pounds. That filled a little faster than I thought it would on the Goliath column. So we're at 5.125. So I'll try and hit somewhere around 10.2 pounds total, so that way we get them somewhat even. All right, now we've got just a hair over 10 pounds in there. It looks like 10.15, so the Goliath column should have a touch more in there, but I don't think it's going to make too big of a difference. We should still be able to see what's going on. So now we'll go ahead and drop these down into the bottom vessel, and then we'll start the recovery process. Okay, now we have the valves open, but as you can see, it's hydrolocking in there a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the pumps for a couple minutes each. We'll just turn them both on. That way it starts drawing everything down into the bottom, into the collection vessel, which is where we want everything. Once we're fairly certain we got everything out of the sight glasses here, we'll go ahead and shut them off, and we'll take a look at that point and kind of see where they're at, make sure they're somewhat even and level. Okay, so at this point we've got everything pretty much dropped out of the top of both of these here, so we'll take a look inside and see what it looks like. And you can see we're just a hair below the dip tube in there, and then on the MVP one we're right about in the same spot there. So at this point we're going to go ahead and close off the top vessels because everything's pulled down to the bottom. Once we get closer to the end, we'll go ahead and open those back up, make sure we've pulled everything through, but for the time being it makes it a little bit smaller area, so it's easier for it to pull a vacuum on. So let's go ahead and kick both these pumps back on and then see what happens. So that one right there is the MVP pump running, and we'll go ahead and turn the Goliath on. All right, now the Goliath pump here is pulling a pretty decent vacuum compared to the MVP pump there. The MVP is just a little below zero, and the Goliath is significantly below zero. So at this point, we're below, about an inch or so below the line, and this is on the Goliath pump. And on the MVP pump, a little bit less. Okay, so right now we are about at the halfway point. We've recovered about 5 pounds of the butane, so let's go ahead and shut both pumps off and kind of take a look and see where we're at in terms of progress. Goliath pumps off. The MVP pump is off. Now let's take a look inside and see how they're coming. Now this here, oh wow. This one here is the Goliath pump, and it's quite a bit below that seam. And over here we have the MVP pump, quite a bit below as well. Not doing too bad. And actually looks like the Goliath pump's a little bit lower. So at this point, it looks like the Goliath pump is actually faster than the MVP pump, even though the MVP is actually 4 times its size. But it's not over yet. Let's turn it back on. Let's see what happens. MVP pump is back on, and now the Goliath. Now right here you can see how deep into vacuum we are with the Goliath pump. And over here, it's not nearly as deep. Again, we're down in deep into that vacuum there. And just a slight vacuum pulled. All right, guys, so we got about 2 pounds left, so let's pause the process again for just a brief moment and take a look and see where we're at. This process here on the Goliath pump is actually pretty much done. I mean, this is about the point when we would stop the process and pull it, leaving a little bit of liquidity in there. We're down at this point below the jacketed area here. Conversely, on this one, there's actually still a decent amount left in there on the MVP 6 pump here. Now, one other thing I want you guys to notice, look at the bottom clamp on the Goliath pump collection vessel. It's actually frosting over and not on the 6 MVP pump. That's actually a frost that we can etch off of there. So interestingly enough, even though the Goliath pump is a quarter size of the MVP 6, it actually finished the process first, at least what we would consider being done. Most of you are going to want to do a pour when it's somewhat liquid, that way it's easier to deal with. However, the testing's not over there. We're going to run this thing until its completion. We want to see them dry up both of those collection vessels entirely. So let's see what all that takes, and let's see who's a clear winner on that one. All right, now we take a look down in here now. The Goliath process is actually just about stalled out. I mean, it's barely boiling in there. That's pulling a vacuum. This one's still going a little bit better, but not much. Not nearly the vacuum. So at this point, the system has actually stalled out on the Goliath pump side. And like I said, that's because this is past the point that we would normally stop the process and do our recovery when it's still somewhat liquid in there. The reason for that is the bottom of the collection vessel is not jacketed. We specifically designed it that way. The reason is it allows us to run hotter temperatures during the process, which allows us to extract faster, but as it gets down towards the bottom, when it concentrates, it actually concentrated on the bottom of it, it doesn't burn the product. Most of you probably aren't extracting and recovering at that high of a temperature. However, even at that high of a temperature, we're still able to get some really golden pure extracts out of it. And the reason being, we slow the process down, and where all the concentrates end up at the bottom of the vessel, it's not actually cooking it. So those concentrates, as you can see, at this point would be frosted over and nice and cold because the whole bottom of the collection vessel is completely frosted. They wouldn't be burning and cooking at 120 degrees. That's another key feature that we've added in. The trifecta is actually packed with a lot of key features that a lot of people don't realize. We put in a little bit of implementations here and there just to make this design process slightly better. Another one of the features that we've implemented was the Goliath pump ability to pull vacuum. The reason that this is important is because as you start the process, there's pressure built up inside the collection vessel. That's traditionally the vapor pressure that's in there that gets transferred. If you watch this from the beginning in slow-mo, the MVP pump will actually eliminate that vapor pressure faster because it's a bigger pump. However, after that pressure is removed, there is nothing left for the pump to do. There is nothing to transfer from point A to point B. So the pump's just kind of going through the motions. It's not really actually doing anything. Controversially, the Goliath pump will actually take advantage of that and start pulling a vacuum. Now, you know when we pull a vacuum against the butane, it lowers the boiling point. By lowering the boiling point, we can get it to evaporate faster. If we can get it to evaporate faster, we end up with a faster recovery. So the premise behind this isn't the size of the pump, because the size of the pump is not the only thing that matters. Its ability to pull vacuum and its ability to pump against pressure. Like we said earlier, the MVP pump doesn't really do that well. And the reason is because how the pump was designed. We specifically set up the Goliath pump to be able to handle pressure and be able to pull a vacuum while pushing against pressure. As you can see right now, we're outputting against the pressure of the pressure vessel, yet it still has the ability to pull a significant vacuum. So regardless of the pump size that you have, during the recovery process, the pump is not the limiting factor. Your limiting factor is how quickly you can evaporate the butane and turn it into a gas that can be recovered. The faster you can evaporate the gas, then the faster that there is something there for the pump to actually be able to take advantage of and recover. No evaporated gas means that there's nothing left to recover. So by causing the system to evaporate faster, by the little designs that we've put in there, like being able to run hotter temperatures on the collection vessel, as well as being able to pull a vacuum, has allowed us to make this a much more efficient system. Now, as of right now, we've got about 2 pounds left in the system here. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and turn the pump on and continue recovering. At this point, we're basically just waiting for the MVP pump to catch back up. At some point it is going to stall out. It's probably going to stall out with a little bit more, a little higher level of butane in there. The reason is it's not pulling a vacuum against that butane. So there's going to come a certain point when there's no enough heat, because we're below the jacketed portion of the collection vessel, that it's not going to actually recover anything. All right, before we turn the pumps back on, let's take a look and see where we're at inside the process here. You can see just barely a little bit across the bottom there. And there's actually still quite a bit inside the MVP column here. So let's go ahead and reactivate both pumps and start the system going again. Okay, so at this point, the MVP6 pump has stalled out in this process. We'll show you guys what it looks like. The Goliath pump's pretty much stalled out. It's trying to do something. It's trying to finish out the process, but like I said, there's not enough heat. This is far beyond what we would normally take these to, though. Usually we would have done our pour off quite a while ago. MVP's pretty close to that point where we do our pour off on it as well. Oh shit. So the Goliath pump did actually finish up. It just did that in the last minute or so. And it's still trying over here. So the Goliath pump did actually finish all by itself on its own. It finished out the process. We're waiting on this one still. So, not very exciting. It's just kind of hanging out here. Boiling a little bit. You can see a little bit of the ripples, but nothing much going on. All right, so the time is now 9:39. We're going to give this a few more minutes. We're going to wait for the MVP pump, see if it can finish out the process, see if it'll collect up and do it on its own, or if we'll have to step in and let the Goliath do its job. So we'll keep this going for a little bit longer. We'll give it 10 more minutes or so. If it hasn't finished it by then, we'll let the Goliath go ahead and handle it. Well, it's been about 12 minutes, so let's check on the progress. You can see it's still not completed the process here. I mean, it's barely moving at all. So let's go ahead and kill the MVP pump. Let's turn the Goliath on and let's finish this process out and see what all that takes. So now we reallocated the Goliath pump to run this column here. Let's turn it on and see what happens. almost instantly you could see a big change compared to the MVP pump. And that's because it's pulling that vacuum deeper and deeper. That's something the MVP pump wasn't actually able to do. So you can see this is quite a bit more violent than it was with the MVP pump. And the Goliath process will actually be able to finish this out. Since the Goliath process wasn't running the whole time, this bottom of this is nowhere near as cold as the bottom of this one. This one's actually coated in frost, whereas this one is not. Alright, we're coming towards the end of the process here. You can still see it kind of boiling off pretty decently. Oh, there it goes. There it goes right there. It's starting to dry. Last little bit of flashing. Touch right over there on the edge. And that is it. Well, there you have it. A side-by-side comparison, and the Goliath beat out the 6CFM from MVP. And I know what you're thinking. It's disappointing. We thought the same thing. We were really looking forward to a different pump that wouldn't require us having to use an air compressor. In fact, something such as the 6CFM that can run off a 110 volt would be really optimal. However, as you can see, it just doesn't work out. It's not quite the same because that pump has not been configured how ours have. Now, of course, we're still going to be offering the 6CFM pump because it does have its place. For some of the guys that don't have the ability to have three-phase electrical to put in a big air compressor that's needed to run the Goliath pumps, it has its place. I mean, it works for that. But for the normal run-of-the-mill and for most of the guys doing, commercial level extracting where they've got three-phase and power requirements aren't really an issue, that's probably not going to be the best pump to use. One Goliath outdoes that pump alone. Two Goliaths is that much better. And two Goliaths is what comes standard with the trifecta system. And with our mini-fecta system, that comes with one Goliath. Now, we did reach out to MVP on this to see what their take was, and maybe we were doing something wrong. We reached out multiple times, and unfortunately, we never got a response back. Now, we are running the pump exactly like they said to. We were using the CO2 for the return spring on the diaphragm, and it's set at 80 psi. From my understanding, then also it limits the output pressure to 80 psi, which in case is part of the issue that we're seeing. However, our pressures never really got that high. We never saw over 40 to 45 psi. It kind of regulated it off fairly well at that point. In fact, it's only been a few minutes and we're already down back below 30 psi. Now, if you have any more questions or would like any more information regarding the trifecta system, the Goliath pumps, or the MVP 6CFM, please drop us a line. Our website is www.anion-usa.com. Again, that's anion-usa.com. Thank you guys for joining us today, and look forward to doing some more videos for you.